you shouldn't do deep work. And this isn't some random clickbait that I've decided to do. I think most of the people who have been scrolling through YouTube who have come across this video who are thinking about doing deep work or trying to do deep work, I think if you've got here, you live a life where you probably shouldn't be doing deep work. And I think if you tried to do deep work, I honestly don't think you'd be able to. See, all things in life have balance. This isn't some, you've got to live a balanced life. That's not what it's going to be, I promise. This is not some sort of sit there and meditate for 5 hours and then do some work. I do not believe that helps anyone. But truthfully, there is a yin, there is a yang. There is deep work and there is deep rest. And if you're not having the rest component, you are not doing deep work. You are just doing work. So what actually is the deep rest component? Well, when you're doing work, it's going to be using different systems in your body. This could be physical, hard labor, hitting the gym. This could be mental. And obviously we know what the mental stuff is as the cognitive tasks where we're thinking and we're going, and we're trying to work out. I kind of actually had a mental not rest deficit, but I had a mental hiccup earlier when you saw me freeze. But those are the mental works. That's mental deep work. Well, not mental deep work, but that's the mental system where we're using that. We have emotional. If I sat there and I was a therapist and I was listening to people crying all day, I would start to be overworking that system. Even if I'm not there as a therapist and doing that all day, there is the news. There is social media. There are these other emotional drains that we have with this system. There is also social. A lot of people like to believe that they don't have to talk to anyone else in life or have any friends, but they don't realize how much that actually gets them down, because as humans, we are hardwired to have some sort of social connection. There's a couple other things, but they don't really matter too much. Like it's honestly situational. There's spiritual, which is people, seeking religion, seeking this, seeking that. There is not sensational. Gosh, what is the last system? I know what it actually is as a thing. It's one of those. Stim, not stim, not like a Darius stim, but sensory. You have your sensory systems. So a lot of people nowadays have sensory issues, and that is something where it might be overworking, but other people will just never reach the threshold of sensory demand to merit a fix. But all of these different systems have different ways of replenishing. They have different rest associated. For physical stuff, you can imagine if I'm tired physically because I've just hit the gym, or if I've just done some cardio, I can very easily sleep. I can take a nice relaxing shower. I can eat some protein and repair my body. But if I'm really emotionally drained because I am that therapist, or because I have a chronic social media addiction or something where I've got 50 hours a day on TikTok, don't know how that's possible, but somehow I've mastered the ability to go back in time to, get around the ban or something. I don't know. But my point is, if somehow that is you, do you really think eating protein and having a good sleep, well, to be fair, the hot shower, the hot bath could actually maybe help with this one. But do you really think these are gonna be what's fixing that system being used and overworked and drained? Probably not. I'm gonna be real, probably not. So you have to acknowledge that all of these different systems, which you might be tapping into when you're doing deep work, require some sort of unique way of resting. And there could be some really, really easy, here are the 5 things I recommend for each system. And I might even give that a little bit later into the video. But that's not what this video is about. It's about telling you that if you're going to enter this deep work, you need to take a look at your deep work and ask yourself, how demanding is this on my systems? Now, don't get me wrong. You might not have consistent deep work. One day you might be locking in to video edit. The next day you might be locking in to be creative. Oh yeah, that's another system, creativity system. And that one's actually interesting when I touch upon it and explain how that one works, because it's a bit different to the rest. But I also want to point out everyone's relationship with these systems can be different. Maybe not the physical ones, because that is quite physiologically grounded, but something like mental, emotional, social. I don't know if you've heard about people where when they're social, they get recharged, and then other people, when they're social, they get drained. That doesn't actually explain it, because there's a deeper reason behind that. But what I'm saying is, for someone, they might have a complete opposite way of replenishing that system that's been fatigued than someone else. And that's why I want this more so to be a you figuring out what systems are being used in a deep work session or consistently in deep work, and literally writing it down and then going, okay, how do I fix it? Because if I'm going to go do deep work and it's going to be me recording hours for over and over, and I want there to be some sort of emotional tie-in where I'm thinking about past me, I'm thinking about the people I can help, and maybe there's a mental component because I do actually need to come up with the words to say. Who knows? Maybe there's even a creativity component because I can't keep things dry and I have to bring in these analogies and be creative. These systems are starting to get drained, and when that happens, they need to be replenished after. So it's literally, we work out what's happening in the deep work block, because look, we won't even be doing deep work the first time we try and do the repair of the deep work, and it's a skill we have to build, but that's besides the point. We're thinking, what systems are we using? And then when the block's over, we say, okay, now we're going to repair these systems. Or we might even stagger the deep work itself to have repair of the systems throughout it. So that's just something, that's like the biggest takeaway, but we are going to dig a bit into it more and how the actual systems interact and how they can be healed and how they can be repaired, because I think that's important and something someone will want to know so they can actually start doing deep work. But to paint a picture of what it looks like if you don't have the deep rest, if you don't replenish the systems you've been using, well, for starters, as I've mentioned time and time again, you are not doing deep work without it. You might sit there, and honestly, the people I see the most who think they can do deep work are the ones who have the suckiest deep work, where it'll be a super long duration where the entire time they're distracted and they are not locked into a task at all. When I do deep work, and I've done this on my newsletter, I have a muscle growth and maybe some random other things newsletter, which I post daily. When I write an article on there, I am fully doing that task until it's done and time ceases to exist. To the point where I once sat down and I was like, I'm going to make an article about strength-specific training. No, not strength-specific, sport-specific training. I said, I don't want to ever give advice on sports training, so I'm going to do it once, I'm going to cover absolutely everything possible, and then I'm never ever going to come back to it again. And then I sat there, and for 5 hours straight, time did not exist. Not a single other tab was opened that was not relevant to the article I was writing, and I ended up having a 6,000 word article with graphics, with it being somewhat concise, and with it being consistent, and I was pretty short after. But I was able to replenish, I was able to do the right stuff, and that's deep work. Now, the time doesn't really matter that I spent doing it, because deep work is turned on to do a specific task, or a string of tasks that are vaguely related. It isn't a block of time where you're being productive. That's honestly pretty shallow, especially if you're just knocking off tasks on a to-do list. When you do deep work, it should feel like a highlight reel. It should feel like nothing else exists. And I know people talk about the flow state. I don't know if the flow state's really how I describe it, because flow sounds like something you have to work your way into. You've got to have a warm-up. You've got to have a flow routine. You've got to have this super wow. It's not. It's just a state of extreme motivation to get something done. An extreme motivation to have no distractions. Again, it's a skill that takes time to build. But let's talk about how these different systems get repaired. And like I said, when you're doing deep work and you're going to have that deep rest block on the same day or the day after, oh shoot, I never told you what happens if you don't have this. Okay, if you don't have this, you get burnout. you can kind of do low tier deep work for a period of time, and then you'll notice you'll have like 2 weeks on, and it will feel like you've done the most in your life. It wasn't even real deep work, by the way, but you feel like you've done the most in your life, and it's probably because you've just ticked off a lot of tasks, and truthfully, the tasks you were doing probably weren't moving the needle. They were probably tasks that were done to avoid the most important task, where you're jumping around and you're like, wow, I'm so productive, wow, I'm getting these wins, and you're avoiding the only thing that matters. You're going to have 2 weeks of that, where you didn't actually achieve anything meaningful, and then you will crash for a week, and you'll be there hating everything. You won't be able to work, you'll feel like you can't do anything, and other things in your life which shouldn't even be affected by the fact that you can't do this specific task or string of tasks or area of tasks, they are now ruined too. And this isn't some I'm just magically gifted and was able to do it all, and now I'm trying to string together the fix and the reasons. This is what my life looked like for years. I would have that time on and then the time off, and there would always be the time off, no matter how many things I built to make myself more productive, to find the tricks into doing it, until I realized that the burnout is just a symptom of the problem, because burnout forces you to take rests. If I do not get sleep, if I do not fix that physical system where I've used my body and I've tired it, I will pass out. You give it a few days and you will pass out. All the other systems work the exact same. When you do not have a rest, a replenish, a fix in place, you will crash. And that is what burnout is. That's when all of the systems collide and you haven't given them the time of day, and they destroy you. And those systems aren't just used in your tasks. That's why it interferes in everything else. That's why you start skipping the gym. That's why you start eating badly. That's why you stop showering or cleaning your room or making your... That's why these things happen. But yeah, let's get into it. So physical is really, really easy. And most people, when they think of fixing all systems, when it comes to rest and recovery, they only think about physical. Look, you're not going to heal your emotional, your mental, your creative, your sensory, whatever. You're not going to heal any of this with sleep and with protein. Don't get me wrong, there might be some effect, there might be some sort of carryover, but that's not what's happening. You can't sleep your way into fixing those systems. And you can tell this because I don't know if you've ever met someone who just barely sleeps, but they are still actually productive. Now, if you watch a productivity channel, you'll hear them yap on about how bad your brain is when you're not getting enough sleep. But the systems involved, if those guys just happen to have really good rest or recoveries, and the sleep is, sure, everything's going to be dimmed a bit, but that's more of a symptom of their physical state being in a deficit. That's actually not as bad for them, and that's why they can function so well. Like, look at those... I don't know. You get what I'm saying, though. It's not about getting sleep to fix your problems. It's about fixing your problems and getting sleep, because that fixes an entirely different problem. So, let's dig into it a little bit. And in fact, I do have to actually open up something that strings it all together, because as much as I might have been riffing for all of that, I don't want to keep riffing, because I will just miss stuff. And this isn't something that I want to miss, because I want to give you the best information possible. And also, I don't really edit these videos, so that is also an apology I have for you, because you will not see it be edited. But let's go into it a little bit. So first we have physical, and you know this one, you sleep. But we can also throw in some other light things. We could throw in dynamic stretching. Dynamic stretching as a channel focusing on muscle growth, focusing on adaptations of muscles. Dynamic stretching in this case is not to help your flexibility. It is to move some blood around. It is to release some endorphins. It is a little bit of a feel good. You've been sitting down for a while. you get up, you move, you do notice that you've now got some physical rest. Because the action that was physically demanding, even though it doesn't sound like it, was sitting. And then you've obviously got your baths, your maybe your walks, and like I say, find your own stuff. Physical rest is not going to be as difficult for people to fix because they already know what works. If you're here, you'll probably go to the gym. They've probably paired people who struggle with deep work, and that's why you found the video, with people who are physically active and want to build muscle, because that's what my channel's about. So you know this one. So we don't actually have to go into it that deep. But if you ever want a little cheat code to physical rest, just sit there, close your eyes, and do some sort of scan of your body. If you start feeling soreness in an area, or you start feeling tightness or any of that, I know it sounds a bit wooby, that's not a word, wooju, I don't know what the expression is. If you ever feel a sensation like that, just give it a shake. Give it some movement, give it a little bit of attention, and even if it doesn't go fully away, you're basically giving it some physical rest. And that's psychological. It's not really going to do much on, the physiological level, but psychology plays a great deal to play. So, we also have mental rest. And mental rest is going to be the problem with having a ton of cognitive load. This is surprisingly something I give advice to for people who hit the gym, who work, who think, maybe they study, I don't know. I always tell them, your warm up, where you're on the treadmill, you're on the bike, you're on the elliptical for 5 to 20 minutes, and you're doing something really, really low intensity, not even zone 2, but like zone 1, that your heart rate is not getting elevated, but you are raising body temperature. And that's part of why I recommend it. But the other part is, it is a cognitive deloader. It is a period where you think about nothing, and whilst that's happening, you're removing every single thing you think about that's been on your mind, the work you've been doing. And it means we're not getting all that rubbish, and you will notice in periods where you're constantly thinking about something, it ruins your gym, it ruins your sessions. That's, if anything, a testament to how much using that mental system makes a difference. But yeah, when you do that cardio, you notice it's easier, you get rid of all that. And that is one of the main things I would recommend for mental rest. You might have heard people talking about doing a body weight routine, or doing a bit of cardio between work blocks and sessions. That is why they are getting that mental rest. Most people don't know how to get mental rest and are uncomfortable with it, because sometimes it is sitting in silence, especially if you've overworked that system so significantly. It's the biggest reason why burnout exists. It is forced mental rest, and it hits you like a truck. But you're basically trying your hardest to remove the constant stream of thoughts. There's that ocean, which is everything that's important and special about you, and that's going to make you successful. But if you spend too long in the ocean, you can't swim anymore and you start to drown. So mental rest is leaving the ocean. It's going back to the shore. It maybe is something which people think is cringe, like meditation or journaling, or just slowing down to consciously, one by one, remove thoughts. Because your mind never stops. You have to be the one to make it stops, or it's going to kill you. Not literally, but that's pretty much how it works. If you've ever sat there and you've got the same thing on loop, repeating, your mental system is absolutely ruined. I know. But not everyone... Actually, no, everyone is suffering from this. I don't know what I was about to say. But if you are suffering from this, which you are, you gotta fix it. So, find a place in your house, a place in nature where you can remove cognitive load, where you can just dump it. Find cardio. Don't find a bodyweight routine if you care about muscle, because that is going to lead to whatever. If you do a cardio, read my newsletter article on low fatigue and cardio. But just do that, or meditation, or whatever. Maybe even be really precious with the time you have and schedule your deep work sessions. Because the second you start doing that, you're saying, this is when I'm using my mental system. That's where the cognitive load is. Outside of that, there's no cognitive load. So you can kind of give yourself a little bit of a healthy barrier. You're not going to continue to think about those things. A lot of people can't do that, by the way. A lot of people cannot remove the work because it's so important to them, which is a huge problem in itself. So time block, maybe meditate, find a special place, do some cardio, or find your own thing. Because like I said, everyone will have their own thing. And I'm not here to give you the thing you're going to use. I'm here to give you ideas. And that's all I can do for you. So, I hope I give you a good idea. Next, we have emotional. When you take in too much emotion, when you're using the system too much, the result is you become emotional. You become very anxious. You become very unhappy. Maybe you start lashing out on people. You get in this kind of emotional pit. And I don't know if you've noticed, but have you ever watched a movie and you feel a bit of an attachment to a character and then they die and you start sobbing? That was not a real person. They were complete fiction. You know the actor's alive and you took on emotionally everything that was happening in the scene. There are moments when that can be good. If you haven't had a cry in a while, if you haven't experienced sadness in a while, that can be a really healthy thing for you. And I don't want to be cringe here, but that is true. But you're getting low doses of this every time you're on social media, every time you hear someone moan or complain, every time you read the news and another bad thing happens. You're taking all of that in. And sometimes they're not even supposed to be emotionally affecting you. Just like the movie where the person who was complete fiction died, it wasn't actually supposed to make you cry. Think about that. These things that are affecting you don't need to and shouldn't be and are hurting. So you need to, honestly, you need to indicate where these things are coming from. Now, I know some of it's unavoidable. If you live with bad roommates, you might be suffering from this big time because you can't separate that. But if it's something else, if it's social media, or if it's a certain genre of music, if it's a type of game or whatever where you notice that you're just taking on emotions from it in a way you don't like, then you either have to pivot the way you're approaching it. You know, your social media, you go from looking at the dark stuff to now you trick TikTok to putting you on the algorithm for hopecore, which is just like hopeful posts and videos of mountains and b-roll and stuff. Or a game that makes you really, really rage, you start improving your mindset, which honestly improves your ability to play the game. But you approach it and you're like, I'm actually going to be more positive. I'm going to stop hating on my teammates who absolutely suck at the game, and I'm going to put myself in the driver's seat because I'm the only thing in the team that I can change. You know, maybe you just pivot like that. Maybe you eliminate. It's up to you to figure out what to do there, but there aren't many ways to actually sit down and recover from this. It usually is pivoting, strengthening your emotional well-being, or eliminating. But the biggest things you need to really be is just aware of your emotions. The second you're aware of your emotions, you can indicate what's causing those triggers. And then you're kind of good to go. So, next, we have spiritual rest. I don't really want to cover this too much because I don't want to go out there and tell anyone how to handle their spiritual journey. I don't think everyone needs a spiritual journey, but everyone has seen someone who has been completely changed by a spiritual journey. So, I guess what I'm just saying is handle that as you will yourself. Explore. It doesn't have to be anything like, you know, praying to a god. It could be something as simple as viewing your body as having energy flowing through it. Again, pretty cringe, but try things out, question things. If spiritual was for you, go look at philosophy. you will find something, and again, don't find something super dark and depressing, but you will find something where it's some sort of moral grounding or whatever. Like, we could even say veganism could be some sort of spiritual rest. But when you find something, it's spiritually, that is taxed when you feel a lack of purpose, a lack of mission, a lack of meaning or whatever. And that is typically where people will find the fix to that. Because the second someone's religious, they can literally just live their entire life saying, I'm going to go to a good afterlife by following this. And it immediately cures that problem. If they can't do that, that's completely fine, but there's going to be something else they need to explore which fulfills that purpose. Luckily, a lot of people in this area do tend to be quite purposeful, but oftentimes I see that they don't truly understand what their purpose is or their meaning or what they're trying to achieve, and it puts them on a really depressive path where they're really inconsistent. One minute they're talking about how they can up and be a monk and go somewhere because they're trying to get that purpose from whatever it is, and the next they're talking about how they don't need purpose at all and they just need to make some money, when although money might be something they need and it might be under some sort of foundation of their purpose, they're not really digging deep enough. And don't get me wrong, purpose can change, it can evolve, it can grow, there can be new roots in that tree, but it's always going to come back to similar things. The way I would handle spiritual stuff, if you don't want to go out seeking through like spirituality, is just look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and start tackling them. Because the second you start doing that, you're gonna get to a place where like your life has the foundations enough where you can start looking for purpose or meaning or whatever. But I don't need to go into that anymore at all. So we can talk about the social systems. Now, when I was speaking about social stuff earlier, I wrongly was talking about people who get recharged from social interactions and people who don't. That wasn't really the right way to word it, because when our social systems are used, it's a bit of a weird one, because it kind of is the inverse of everything else. See, all the other systems, they almost start with like 100 tokens and then you spend them, and then when you repair, when you replenish, you get those tokens back. With social, it's almost like you start at 100 and then without doing anything, you are losing tokens, and then to replenish, to get them back, you need to have the social replenishment, which it's not what you'd think it is. It's not as simple as going out and socializing. If it sounds weird, but that can actually be one of the quickest way to drain that social system, because social rest is about connecting with people. It's about feeling like someone goes through the same stuff as you, actually going beyond interests and maybe logic, and actually going to kind of the emotional stuff or the more meaningful things. If you've ever socialized and thought, wow, I'm socializing so well, but you just feel alone, that's a sign that it's not really social rest. Like, it's not the socializing that makes a good difference. It is just the act of socializing. But you basically just need to get real with people. You need to be yourself. That's one of the biggest things. If you're not being yourself, it's going to be draining those social coins, and you probably have no way of replenishing the social coins unless you have that one person where you can get them all back. Now, I'm not saying that it's illegal to drain those social coins, because like I said earlier, they're going to drain anyway if you do nothing, but you just need a way to replenish them. I guess if it's a struggle, the best way is being face to face with someone. For starters, that is going to have a little bit of replenishment. Of course, if you do not get along with them, if you feel absolutely dread when you spend time with them, it's not going to override the coins you're losing by doing that. But face to face makes a huge difference. For anyone who has a friend group from like school or something where you play a game with them, it's nowhere near the same to when you see them at school and you laugh and you both recognize that each other has a face which has facial expressions. But outside of that, if you spend most of your time listening instead of talking, you will oftentimes realize that they think the same as you, they act the same as you, they've got the same struggles as you, and that replenishes the coins. You don't feel so alone, you don't feel so singled out, and you feel just like everyone else. And that's kind of the biggest thing which social rest does. It stops the feeling alone, the feeling different, the feeling like the ugly duckling. So, last but not least, make good friends. That's gonna be a big part of it there. Sensory rest is not for everyone. Most people don't need this, but a lot of people do need this now, and it's growing even more and more. Sensory rest is for anyone who has basically been overstimulated for a long amount of time. Their sensory systems have been on an overdrive, and I notice a lot of people who try and do deep work have this exact problem, because when you struggle to do deep work, when these things aren't, being replenished, being recovered, being rest, there's a really, really easy way to do that, and it is from riding the stim wave. This is how the stim wave works, and I know because I used to ride it very, very frequently. You would start with coffee, and then you would throw in music. Music would start to help. You'd start peaceful, kind of lo-fi. It wouldn't really work that much anymore. So then you add something. What you add? Well, it's a little bit harder, a little bit faster, a little bit louder, and maybe up the coffee a bit. You see where this is going, don't you? Eventually, you keep scaling up the stimulation, where there's always something new, to the point where you've got a YouTube video playing or a Netflix show playing or something, and you've got music playing. We'll go back to the music in a little bit because it gets bad. But you've also, you have to have your coffee, your Monster, or whatever. The music. What is the music you're listening to? Well, it's not really something hard or fast or loud anymore. It's something like the entire B-movie, whilst the entire Bible in Chinese or Japanese, whilst some sort of, Beethoven playlist plays, and they're all like surround sound, where one's in front of you, one's to the left, one's to the right, and you're using all of that to just ride that stim wave to work. And then what happens? Well, when you can't keep increasing that wave because you need more and more as it starts to wear off its effectiveness, you reach a breaking point where you get a sensory issue. And, for a week or two, sounds, feelings, tastes, everything is just impossible. That is what happens when you have constant stimulation. And the fixes are quite strange. I'll talk about the fix in a second, but the better thing is really just avoidance. We should not be riding the stim wave because we should be replenishing the other systems. I'm not saying the stim wave, I'm not saying the sensory system will not be depleted without riding the stim wave. It still does get, obviously for others more than some, but sometimes that is avoidance of certain things. That would be avoidance of over-consuming social media. That's the biggest one. That would be being more careful with the music we're using. Maybe even recognizing our caffeine's a bit too high. The real elimination there is eliminating the stim wave, but other things in a day that give a little bit too much stimulation also, obviously come into that. But when you start to notice that this is a problem, or maybe for whatever reason, you just have you have a really sensory day where I don't know, if let's say I was going to a powerlifting meet, that would probably be a really big sensory thing where you're hitting the pre-hard, everyone around you is cheering, everyone's hyping you up, maybe there's even some smelling salts where it's really putting you into that state, and then you perform a lift and you make it and you feel incredible, and it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs, and that is riding the stim wave like crazy. At the end of that, you will feel completely euphoric, and that only means that when the wave ends, you are going to be in a complete hole, and it'll be very tricky. So there are some things we can do. The biggest thing is really just unplugging, having days or blocks or periods where we're unplugging from tech. Maybe if we want to work still, we can use pen and paper, But that's like the big thing. Unplugging from it. Unplugging from electrics, maybe just music, maybe just a show for a day. Like whatever, right? You just pick something. A bigger thing here is just being more present of these things and recognizing how it's affecting. I used to riding the stim wave, I used to have a thing where if I showered, I opened my mouth. If the water hit the base of my mouth, if I had like a sensory issue that day, it would be like, you know, like a mini seizure. If not, then it'd be fine. And that would be like my way of working out how I am response-wise. I never really had a way of fixing it or preventing it from happening, but that was just like my own way of testing. And everyone will have something like that where they can monitor it throughout time and go, you know, maybe there's a problem. But interestingly, the sensory fix, and it's one of those things where it's quite a unique way that we replenish it. There's obviously elimination, reduction, whatever, but when it's actually reached the point where we're in that deficit where we can't escape, you'd be surprised on what you need to do, because it is locking into one sensory. Now, this can be touch, this can be sound, this can be taste, this can be visual, it can be smell, but we literally remove everything but that one thing. So, taste would be, it'd basically be like blind eating. Sound would be like shutting our eyes and just listening to music for hours. There's also places where you go through sensory experiences where they do a similar thing, and it's literally made for sensory rest. You'll be able to see some of them near you if you, I guess, browse the internet, unless you live in the middle of nowhere. But it'll be like you're walking through a place and one's lights, the other's complete dark, but you're feeling things. The next is some sort of like whale sounds, but you don't see any. It's like one by one you start experiencing senses on their own. And weirdly enough, that's what replenishes it, which sounds really, really bizarre because that doesn't really make any sense, but it's how it works. The next one also makes no sense, and you'll find out why. And this is the last system, and it's something that you will, if you want to make it ahead, you will be needing to use. And that's creativity. Because anyone who's building something knows that no matter how mental you can be, not in a bad way, but you know, using that cognition, no matter how much of that you can have, if it's not creative, it won't really do too well. Because creativity is that little spark where you either have it or you don't. And everyone has a different form of creativity and the expression there, so it doesn't have to be consistent. But the interesting thing about creativity is the way you actually replenish that creative side is by being creative. What does this mean? What on earth am I on about? So, when you do a creative task or work, you're forced to do it. You're under certain requirements. There's rules. There's a time. There's a deadline. When you're not under those conditions, you can be creative on your own terms. You can do whatever you want, whatever medium you want. It doesn't have to be drawing. It doesn't have to be painting, but there is going to be something creative you feel that could be fun. And you do it on your own terms, you do it in your own way, and that replenishes the creativity and all the points that you just burnt because you were forced to burn them. Do you see how that works? Now, if you are someone who you cannot find the medium, just keep looking, because there will be something. But if you can't always rely on it, or you're that creatively burnt out that you need to repair and come back to a normal point, which does happen. There are artists who will never ever do a personal piece of work because they're that creatively burnt out, and then they say, quitting socials for 2 months, all my commissions are paused. Like, you've seen that before. But if that's you, the fix is you see the creativity that exists in life. I know that might sound a little bit bizarre right now, but let me tell you how that works. So, if I like art galleries, I hate art galleries, but if I like art galleries, I go see some art galleries. If I like movies, I go see some movies. If I like songs, I go see them. And obviously, the focus is on new, it's on innovation, it's on creativity, it's on interesting, it's on something I can admire the beauty in. It might even be a walk in nature where I'm unexpectedly surprised to see certain things. Maybe I take a photo. that's some creative expression. But the real point there is, it's not as effective to see someone else's creativity. If anything, that's motivation, that's inspiration, that's slowly filling you up. But sometimes you need that because you cannot express the creativity because it is that tanked with your creative system. But all in all, that's it. If you start paying attention to what systems are being used, if you start repairing the systems when they are used, if you get out of any deep holes that you are in currently in any of these systems, because I guarantee at least one of them you'll be thrown into the complete deep end of the ocean where you are drowning. If you fix it, you'll start to notice you're able to do deep work. You're able to recognize if something's actually deep work or shallow work, what systems it's using, what it's not, how you need to repair from it, how much time it's going to take to repair, how much time it's going to take to do. You kind of start to notice all of that, and you can actually do deep work instead of not doing deep work, and you don't ruin your life, and you can stay consistent, and everything's good and everything's well. So all that being said, subscribe to the channel if you care about gains or random bits of insight. Go subscribe to the newsletter, please, if you definitely care about gains or nutrition or general health or random bits of insight. I hope I helped you. I really do. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me yap on.